Welcome into episode 46 of the Sources Say podcast, your go-to Kentucky basketball and recruiting podcast on the growing KSR Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Pilgrim of Kentucky Sports Radio, and today I am happy to be joined once again by Travis Graff and David Sisk of Cats Illustrated. Travis, how are you doing today, man?
Doing great. It was good to finally get all of the Sources Say crew together in one spot for the first time this past weekend.
Heck yeah. Yeah, but that's going to be the bulk of our conversation today. We'll talk about that here in a minute. But first, David, how are you doing?
Doing good, guys. Doing good. Good to see your faces live here.
So we have a ton to talk about, a bunch going on regarding the upcoming 2021 roster, how UK might close that out. But more importantly, the 2022 recruiting restrictions were lifted on Monday. So before that started, we went down to Brentwood to go see Skyy Clark play in an open run against college and pro talent. It was a great time. So let's jump right into that to go talk about, and we'll talk about our trip to see Skyy Clark. So on Saturday, we drove down, Travis and I got in the car. We drive down to Brentwood, Tennessee, and we get to go see none other than 2022 five-star point guard Skyy Clark, who is arguably Kentucky's top recruiting target in the class of 2022. We get to go see him play against the likes of Robert Covington of the Houston Rockets, Darius Garland of the Cleveland Cavaliers, Ian Clark, who was Steph Curry's former backup in Golden State when they were, winning all their titles and the dynasty was going on. Former Kentucky forward Alex Poythress. I mean, just the event was absolutely loaded with talent. So, right off the bat, this was our first time kind of scouting and seeing these guys together for the first time. David, we'll start with you. What were your initial thoughts on Skyy Clark as a future talent and potential Kentucky Wildcat?
Bigger and thicker than I had thought. Did not look the part of a rising high school junior, more like a rising maybe college junior. Really thick in the trunk, legs, traps, upper shoulders. Looked like a man, facial hair, 6'1", I'd say, every bit of 185, 190 pounds. Playing, like you said, not only against pros, but guys like Jalen Barford, Maurice Fitzgerald, some other guards out of there who have either graduated college and gone on to play overseas or G League, or some that are in college now. And if you said there's a kid out here that's a high schooler, who is it? You would have never picked him. So he's one of those kids right now who is just really been blessed genetically to have just the frame that he has. He may be one of those kids you worry about, has that maxed out. His dad said it hasn't, according to you guys. But, he's big for his size here early as a guard. So when you look at, I'm not talking about a kid that's gripped 7 feet. I just mean a big, strong, physical guard that's got just a max load of power, has the ball handling ability, has it on a string, can pull you out and get by you. But like I said, strong enough that he can really run you into a ball screen. Was really impressed defensively how he's so strong, how he can just get down in a stance and go heel to toe and in a crouch and just move fluidly, and he never has to raise up. He's so strong. Not sure yet how well he shoots the ball, but he didn't have to. And trust me, that's a mouthful when you're looking at the guys he's playing against, and he never had to shoot the outside shot. He could get to the rim on them. So as a guy told me, Tony Parker didn't have to rely on the outside shot. And another guy told me if he played EYBL this year, he'd average 35 a game. So different than I looked, and actually better than what I anticipated.
Now, Travis, you went down the week before, and you were kind of you gave us kind of a preview last week on this show of what you saw. Same talent, identical talent. Really, Alex Poythers was there, Darius Garland was there, Ian Clark, all of the above. They were all there. Now, Travis, what would you say the difference was between week 1 and week 2 that you saw, and what are your general thoughts on after seeing him in person, I guess, for the first time?
Well, I'll say this: in week 2, he did he had a much better all-around performance than he did in week 1. And I think that the people down there that were running the show were trying to help get him, because the first week that I was down there, he wasn't able to get into a rhythm because Darius Garland and Robert Covington were running the show, and he was on the same team as those guys. And this week they had split up all the teams, and he got to run more of the show. And like David said, he excelled in the pick and roll. He was able to orchestrate really well out there, going left or right. A couple weeks ago, he's focused on just going left, but he showed that he has elite finishing packages in the paint with either hand. There's one sequence where he took over this week for about 5 minutes straight. It was just highlights of his. Stripped Ian Clark, had a breakaway dunk, had a sick spin move, reverse layup, left hand. He does a good job of splitting the double team off of the pick and roll. Does a good job of, like David said, he's strong, got strong butt, strong legs, strong everything, and he's good at stacking his defender and getting them on his hip. And he doesn't have to be flashy and get a lot of dribble separation with the ball because he's so strong that he can bull his way through. But he does have the ball on the string, like David said, and the only thing that I saw was his shot wasn't falling. His open set shot was falling a couple weekends ago, but it wasn't this weekend. But neither week I saw him really shoot well off pick and roll, but that's something that his trainer said that they're working on, is his shot. But he has no problem with his mechanics. It's all fluid motion. He good footwork, good smooth release all the way through. And like David said, he is strong. He's probably the strongest guard if he goes to Kentucky that I think that Kentucky's had since probably Isaiah Briscoe.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with specifically, that balance of strength and, that twitch quickness, along with, his flat out ability to just dribble the ball. I mean, he literally has some of the best ball handling skills I've seen since it might be Isaiah Briscoe. I think those two go hand in hand in terms of just having that ball in a string, being able to get where they want, finding those open spots, getting wherever they want on the floor. That is who Skyy Clark is to a T. And I think we saw that more, not necessarily against the pro talent, because again, these are guys that are 90% of the players on the floor were making money playing basketball, and he was the youngest player on the floor. So the fact that he was able to do what we saw him do made so much more sense on his performance on Sunday when he went up against the high school and college age talent. So the Saturday was, late college and professional talent, mostly pro talent. Sunday was 100% dedicated to high school and college. And if you saw the highlight tape on Sunday, oh my goodness. I mean, he just flat out – literally, he was literally toying with him. I texted Kenny after Skyy's dad afterward. I was like, dude, he literally just toyed with him from start to finish. It's not even fair what he's able to do against people his own age. And that really got me thinking, man, he's right at that 16, 17, 18 range in his recruiting rankings. I'm just sitting here thinking, if there are 16, 17 players better in the country than Skyy Clark, you gotta show me who they are, because right now I genuinely think he's a top 10 talent, maybe even potentially top 5 when that day comes. I think he will end up being a top 5 recruit.
His dad said that his growth plates haven't closed yet, and he's told me that the doctor said that he's supposed to get up to at least 6'4". Everybody's questioning his height. I'm 6'1". And like David said it perfectly, I think people question his height because he's so thick. If he was scrawny, he would look much taller.
Yeah.
But I'm 6'1", and I was looking up at him just a little bit. He's probably 6'2", probably closer to 6'3" than he is 6'1".
Yeah.
And I think if he gets up to 6'3", 6'4", you're talking about a top 10 player and one of the most the classes ever.
And you think of guys that Calipari goes after, as a Calipari prototypical point guard. That that if he ends up being 6'4", 6'5", I bet he could push 200. 6'4", 6'5", 200, 210 maybe by the time he puts on some muscle when he gets to Kentucky or wherever he does decide to go to college. We'll talk about that here in a minute. But that is a Calipari point guard to the T. That's exactly who he's recruiting, and that's why I wouldn't be shocked at all if we hear of a Kentucky offer at some point here in the near future. I don't know when that's going to be, but I think the general consensus right now is that he is well on his way of earning a Kentucky offer. Before we move on from that event itself, there's another guy in attendance that is of substance to Kentucky fans, Brandon Miller, another top 15 guy in the class of 2022. David, we saw, we kind of talked about him before we got down there and kind of what we thought of his game beforehand. After seeing him in person, have you, what are your thoughts on his game? And do you think he's as a top 15 player in the country, do you think he fits what Kentucky would be looking for, in the class of 2022?
It was just hard for me to get a read because, in fairness to him, he was matched up against Robert Covington a lot. So you've got a guy who 16 years old, well, I'm not sure about the age, but a rising junior as well, 2022, going against a guy. And I didn't realize Covington's had as good an NBA career as what he's had. He's had 7 years in a row averaging double figures.
Yeah, he's one of the top 3-and-D talents in the NBA. That's, for Brandon Miller to go heads up with him is no joke. But continue.
And he's got about a $50 million contract to prove it.
Yeah.
So you could just tell, playing against a guy like that, it was just overwhelming. But I don't want that to be unfair, to Brandon, because that would be to a lot of guys his age. And I just think he was the one that really what was in a sink or swim situation. I talked to the trainer who puts this on, Jamal Richardson, talked to him Monday, I guess it was, and asked him about, just what about Brandon right now? And he says, look, he's going to be special. He thinks he could play out on the perimeter and end up being 6'9" or 6'10". But, he said he agreed that it was just a tough situation. But he wasn't down on his game at all. He gets to see him a lot, and he thinks he's going to be really good.
Travis, we on our drive back from Brentwood, we were talking about Brandon's game in particular, and you reached out to somebody who I thought hit the nail on the head with their description of him. What was that? And what are your general thoughts on Brandon's game?
I think everybody that I talked to said that he is a guy that he's kind of a tweener. Like, he's not a 3 and he's not a 4. He's probably looking at him the other day. He's listed as 6'6", but he looks closer to 6'8". It's all motor with him. If he can figure out the motor, he'll fix a lot of his problems. But like David said, he's not as strong as Skyy is. So he struggles more against the defense of the NBA guys. And he was limited to spot up shooting, maybe a one dribble pull up. The 2 weeks I watched him, he probably had 4 or 5 highlight plays. But the way he's built and the way his game is right now, he's not going to flourish in that setting. And I think that he's a guy that on down the line could be a fantastic stretch 4 if you can get him to buy into the 4 role instead of the 3, because I know everybody wants to play a position down. But I think that he got a Wake Forest offer today. He's got a couple offers past couple of days. Florida offered and a couple other schools. But, he's got a long list of suitors.
Yeah, my only concern about his game was that there was so much just trotting up and down the floor. It didn't feel like I know, again, in that setting he was playing against pros. Literally, Robert Covington, to go heads up with him would scare anybody that wasn't on that same level of NBA prowess. But it didn't feel like he wanted to be there. It didn't feel like he was wanting to show off his top 15 talent against the pros the way Skyy was. Like, you could tell Skyy I mean, there wasn't a huge drop off between the pro talent and Skyy, but there was still an obvious drop off in terms of just general skill and turning the ball over and making simple mistakes, trying to, go behind the back between two players, little mix ups like that would, make anybody look, less than against a pro talent. But it didn't seem like Brandon had that same, killer instinct that you saw from Skyy, that Skyy was trying to prove everybody that he fit in. Brandon was like, well, I know I'm a top 15 talent against my own guys. I'm going to stand on the perimeter and knock down open jumpers whenever the ball's thrown my way. It didn't feel like there wasn't that same killer instinct that we saw from Skyy. And I mean, that might be no fault to Brandon, because I haven't seen him against guys his own age. I just think like David said originally, I want to see more from him before I make any long-term judgments and decide whether I think Kentucky needs to offer him, whether he'd be a great fit at Kentucky, et cetera.
I'm not going to get too tore up yet, if he didn't have a high motor in a scrimmage played in the church.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you got to look at the setting too.
Yeah, I completely agree. So go for it.
You can learn a lot of stuff from those type of settings, and everybody's itching to see some basketball, high-quality, talented basketball. But at the end of the day, he wasn't going against his age group. And while like somebody like Skyy excelled in that setting, it's not fair, like I've talked about, to just write him off based on a couple of pro runs where he's playing against dudes much stronger and much older than him.
Yep, I completely agree. Okay, slightly moving ahead, but not really, considering we're still talking about the same kids. Just the recruiting madness that we saw following our trip to Brentwood, starting on Monday at midnight. So I guess Sunday midnight going into Monday, the recruiting restrictions were lifted on 2022 kids, where coaches were able to contact the recruits directly as opposed to having to go through the parents or AAU coaches, high school coaches, whatever, to indirectly contact these kids. Division I coaches are now allowed to reach out directly. So, starting at midnight, we heard, the phones were ringing off the hook. We heard of all the top level talent getting contacted by all the top level programs. And the three of us basically spent our entire Monday contacting these coaches, contacting the parents, contacting the players themselves about who got talked to, who, when they reached out, all that good stuff. So I'm just going to go through the list of guys that Kentucky reached out to specifically, kind of in order, but not really, just kind of the timeline in which I wrote them down. But it's kind of a loose estimate of who was prioritized based on earlier in the day. So Jaden Bradley was the first confirmed guy that got, that Kentucky reached out to. 2022 5-star point guard, top 10 consensus top 10 talent. Skyy Clark got contacted, 5-star, 4-star right on the fringe. Dylan Hunter, who David just reached out to him, or somebody that was close to Dylan. You could talk about that if you want to. Enoch Bokier, Brandon Miller, James Jewell out of Eastern High School in Louisville, Kentucky. Bruce Thornton, I reached out to his AAU director, who said that Kentucky has scheduled a meeting with him, but they haven't officially contacted him yet. Brandon Huntley Hatfield, who we've talked extensively about on this show, widely expected to reclass to 2021. His mom said that he wasn't even expecting coaches to reach out to him because the general consensus is he's moving to 2021. But she said that Kentucky, along with Kansas, Wake Forest, Georgia, Auburn, Tennessee State, and Western Kentucky, all reached out to him. Kamari Lands, who, Travis, you confirmed that. Sadrake Nganga did not, but UCLA, Kansas, Maryland, St. Mary's, he's going to have a whole bunch of, upper tier, high major schools reach out to him. So, again, 10, 12 players that were confirmed, and a lot of players that were probably reached out that we haven't even heard of yet, just because, Calipari likes to work in silence.
Let me ask you this. Can we confirm that Bokier got contacted? I know when I talked yesterday he hadn't.
No. So, yeah, I scrolled through that too quickly. No. He said, when I talked to him, he said that Kentucky scheduled a meeting, reached out to schedule a meeting, but didn't officially reach out to him about, actually talk to him about his recruitment or anything like that. It was I guess they technically reached out to say, hey, we're going to be talking to you, but they have not one-on-one talked to him about his recruitment or anything like that yet. So I guess
they reached out to I don't know if it's Derek or Derek Whitehead, number 12 player on Rivals. Couple guys that I expect UK to reach out to that they haven't yet is Bruce Thornton, Sadrak, and Ganga, like Jack said, and Scoot Henderson. Those are a couple guys that could see UK interest here in the next few days.
Now, David, are there any players on that list that kind of surprised you that UK did reach out to, or are there also any other names that that UK has not yet reached out to that you figured would be on the top of their priority list?
No, there's no surprises as far as guys that they have. I think the fun thing, the first time they can contact is just to see actually who all they do, because, I mean, we really have no way of knowing, exactly, down to the T who it's going to be. I know you guys had said when we talked Saturday, just, to expect them to go just down the list, top 10. And go from there. So I guess anybody that's in the top 10, we thought they may reach out, and Jalen Duran's a name that we watch, and some other guys like that. And, of course, Amani Bates. That would probably be a waste of time because nobody thinks he's going to go to college. And it may be a situation, too, where, there's so much to do that the coaches say, hey, if we think this guy has no chance whatsoever to go to, to college, we're not going, we got other stuff to do.
I think that I read on Instagram, I'll have to confirm with some people, but I think that UK reached out to Chris Livingston's mother, but they haven't reached out to him yet. So
yeah, I think that broke right before we started the show, I believe. I think one of the 30 recruiting group messages I'm in, one of them said that they talked to Chris Livingston's mother or something like that. I don't know. There's so much going on that the point of all of this being that it's been a massively busy week for the Kentucky coaching staff. They've reached out to so many guys. They've kind of just divided and conquered with everything. I talked to somebody close to the Kentucky program going into the weekend and kind of said, okay, how do you think Monday's going to go? Where are things going to go? And they basically said, go from the top of the list down to, top 10, top 15 ranking. Skyy, him kind of being included in that top 15 ranking, and then the local guys. So, James Jewell out of Eastern High School was a guy that a lot of people kind of, he visited for it was Big Blue Madness. They've kind of loosely kept in contact with him. I think he's going to end up being a top 150, top 100 type guy. Could end up being like a JJ Trainer down the road that they're just going to, they're going to flirt with and see if, what his legitimate interest is in Kentucky. And if, that could be one of the in-state signees that they look at. But that was one name in particular that they said that they were going to reach out to. And there were some others, like Braden Sipple was a guy that UK's been reaching out to. He's from right on the Kentucky-Ohio border. His family grew up a Kentucky fan, big Kentucky fan. So guys like that they know they could get that might be just, further down the list are guys that they either have already reached out to or planning to reach out to in the near future. After all this stuff going on, Travis, going back to the guy that we've, I feel like if there's one recruitment that the three of us know, I would bet on no more than just about anybody else out there, Skyy Clark's recruitment. Would you say that your mind has changed at all, considering, the timeline of, potentially getting an offer, Kentucky's interest? I know that Duke just reached out to him. Could Duke become a player down the road? Has your mind changed at all on Skyy Clark's recruitment since Saturday, since we saw him?
No, and I don't normally stick my neck out here like this, but if UK offers Skyy, which I expect them to, if they offer Skyy, barring something unforeseen happening in the future out of left field, I think he's a lock to Kentucky.
I would wholeheartedly agree with you on that statement. I think, talking that same conversation I had about how they're planning on, approaching the 2022 class and all that stuff. I think they know what they have in Skyy Clark and Jaden Bradley in terms of talent level and level of comfort in their recruitments, where I think they've both kind of expressed that, hey, we are very, very interested in your program. You're going to be in it in the thick of things, if and when that offer comes. And I think because of how well they have done building those relationships leading up to it, they're not in any rush to, be one of the first schools to offer and push for a commitment and all that. I think they know what they have in their back pocket with that. So they're just kind of, widening their net a little bit and exploring, their other options, kind of weighing okay, is there any chance of a 2023 number one? Does DJ Wagner reclass to 2022? Is that a guy? Does Devin Askew stay for 3 years? There are just some roster management things that I think UK is gonna explore and just double and triple check before going on and pushing for a commitment. But I don't think that UK gets out of the summer before offering Skyy Clark. And if I'm going to put money on it, I think that we see a commitment. I think Kentucky's in fantastic position, but I do think that a commitment comes before the year is over, before his, I guess, junior season at Brentwood would begin. Go for it.
The ball is in Kentucky's court with that recruitment. I also feel really strongly as of today about, even if they land Skyy Clark, about them also landing Jaden Bradley, top 10 player, top 2 or 3 point guard in the class. I think those two would really complement each other, and I think that those parties talked about, like as we've talked about here, I think that they're really serious about playing together. And I've talked to both people, or people around both parties, and there's definitely high mutual interest in playing together. But I'm not going to predict that whatsoever, because how many times have we seen, so-and-so is going to play here, so-and-so is going to play with this guy, that guy. One is supposed to be Emmanuel Quickly and Zion Williamson.
Oh, yeah.
And
yep.
Stuff like that falls through all the time. Josh Christopher, Jalen Green, same thing.
Yep. Yeah, that Zion Williamson and Emmanuel Quickly was my first, scoop. I was at that weren't you, David? We were there together. Wasn't that weren't you there with me when interviewing Emmanuel Quickly and Zion Williamson at that Adidas Gauntlet event?
Yeah, I'll never forget it. I was probably 30 feet away when he hit his head on the side of the backboard blocking the shot, and he cut his cheek on the edge of the backboard.
Yeah,
and,
it was
playing in his hometown of Spartanburg. Yeah, so it was something I always remember.
Yeah, he gave us a quote that was just ridiculous. He said at the time he was a package deal with Emmanuel Quickly, and he flat out told the reporters there, if I'm going to go to the same place Emmanuel Quickly is. And that at that time, Emmanuel Quickly was seen as a lock to Kentucky. So everybody went, if he's going where Emmanuel Quickly's going, why would he not end up at Kentucky? So that was my first, because I asked the question, and I was just getting started with it. I had barely asked any recruits any questions in the past. So when a player of his stature answered a question and it was of that nature, I was like, holy crap, this is nuts. So yeah, that was definitely interesting, but something to keep in mind with this Skyy Clark and Jaden Bradley thing, because even though as of today we feel pretty darn confident that both of them end up in Kentucky, things could change. But I'm definitely feeling more confident in Skyy ending up at Kentucky than Jaden as of today. Moving on just a little bit, last week we talked. The majority of our show was about Cade Cunningham, the Oklahoma State situation, kind of how that all is unfolding, and whether or not Kentucky would end up being an option for Cade. Now, I talked to, on that same conversation on Friday, I had talked to somebody close to Kentucky and asked, flat out about Cade and whether that's a legitimate possibility. And let me put it this way. Cade is flat out, 100%, facts here. Cade has been their favorite guard target of the year. They think that he is a transcendent talent, think he's going to end up being a superstar in the NBA. There's no doubt in my mind that if Cade came knocking on their door, that Calipari would turn him down. There's just no way. I mean, I know for certain if that day ever came that Cade would be added to the roster and it would be huge. But as of right now, that is not something that the coaching staff is even entertaining. I don't think that this is I think the way things are leaning right now is that he's going to end up staying at Oklahoma State. The three options in order that I was told was Oklahoma State, overseas, which would likely be Australia or something like that, in the G League. And from there, it would be exploring his college options. And there are a lot of things that have to happen before we even talk about who those college options would be. But I think the way things are trending is that Cade's going to end up staying at Oklahoma State. Travis, are you kind of feeling that same way based on what you've heard and who you've talked to in the last 2-3 days?
I'll talk to, as soon as the Oklahoma State stuff broke, I texted, like we talked about in the last episode, I texted somebody close to Kentucky and was like, hey, is this a possibility? They have to tell us no, but you can tell by their tone what is really going on. So they said no, and that's all I heard from it until you had that scoop, and I never really expected him to be at Kentucky. I've always thought for a while, up until there started to be smoke that he was going to stay at Oklahoma State, I heard a lot of buzz about overseas, and I think that overseas may have been the leading option for a little bit, but it still might be. It's still one of his top options, but it seems like there's a ton of smoke around him returning to Oklahoma State.
Now, David, I think we saw one player, I guess two players today now that have announced that they're coming back to Oklahoma State. One did announce that they're leaving, and Annie or Anai, however you pronounce his name. Do you get a sense that Cade is going to follow in the footsteps of the two players that have announced that they're coming back, or do you think he's going to end up being like Anai or Ani, however you say his name, and opt to leave the program?
I don't know how focused I'm going to be here. I'm dog sitting, and my daughter left a dog here, and it is ransacking our house. And that's why I keep turning. So we're going to see what happens here. I think he'll stay. If the rest of them, I think, especially with having a family, brothers on the staff, I just don't think he's going to go anywhere. I think started hearing stuff last week that, that was still the strong first option. And that was even with some players. Everybody thought there was going to be an exodus out there. And, Corey Evans kind of touched on it earlier in the week that there's not. So I expect him to stay.
Yeah. That's definitely a situation that would be a game changer for Kentucky. I mean, if it ever got to that point, we talked about it extensively last week, but it's just one of those things that it's something to monitor and kind of keep keep a close eye on, but it's just not something that UK is even entertaining at this point. So if they're not going to put in the effort to entertain it or dig into it and all that, I'm not going to. So we'll leave it at that for now. Now, while Cade isn't a major possibility, there was one name that kind of caught me off guard as a player that the UK is still actively monitoring. So I asked about, is the roster done? Are things going to stand put as they are? And they said, there's nothing else out there. I think, I asked a little bit about Frank Anselm, and they talked exactly what we had said on this show in the past, that he was just going to be a roster addition. People were kind of looking way too into it as is Kentucky getting that desperate that they need to look at a long-term project? If he's going to be a 10, 15-minute player, Kentucky's just screwed this year if they're going to rely on a guy like him. They kind of doubled down and said that was just where we were just flirting with the situation, seeing how that would go. That was never going to be expect him to come in and make a difference in year one. He flat out wanted more minutes, bigger role. He ended up going to Syracuse, no big deal. Same thing with DeAndre Williams. He wanted something bigger than Kentucky was looking for. They're not looking for that major difference maker. They're just flat out looking for a guy that can, help if he's good enough to help, but they feel comfortable in their depth as it is. So based on where things stand right this second, they're, fully content on keeping things as they are, unless the one person that they specifically mentioned by name was Makur Maker as a guy that fans should keep a close eye on, understanding, the fact that he's all in on the NBA and that's kind of the priority, that's his biggest priority. But that's definitely a name that, Travis, we had talked behind the scenes extensively about. UK feels pretty confident in Makur's abilities and, on-court abilities. I think they're a little bit higher on his game than we have been in the past. What do you know about that, intrigue on Kentucky's end regarding Makur?
I had somebody close to the Kentucky program tell me that they thought he had some Kevin Garnett, some traits of Kevin Garnett, and I was like, whoa, like they think highly of this dude, because I've looked at his tape, I've talked to people, and I think he would give nothing more than a EJ Montgomery sophomore production at most. I think maybe 8 and 6. I think that he would average 4 and 4 off the bench at Kentucky. I think that his name brings a lot of clicks and likes and oohs and ahs, but the thing is, he's got to want to play down low.
Yeah.
He thinks he's a guard, and the thing is, that's fine if you want to play outside, but he's 7 foot and he shoots it from his belly button. And he's got the slowest windup I've ever seen. So it kind of negates being 7 foot. But he is a guy that come March, I mean, you could see some scary stuff. But I think early on he would struggle. And I just wonder if adding him would add headache. Because I mean, he's got certain wants and needs that his brother had certain wants and needs. I think that, like I said, I think he'd definitely be a great piece toward the end of the season and possibly play 20 minutes a game toward the end of the season. But as a whole, I think he's more of a project than people think.
David, based on what you've seen out of Makur, I know you've said in the past that you're not like super familiar with his game, but you've done a little bit of research, watched some film on him. What do you think of him in terms of an immediate impact guy? What do you think he would bring to the table from day one and then toward the end of the year, like Travis was saying, toward March?
Now, I did watch him play last July in Birmingham, and I never saw him play in these games inside the three-point line. In fact, he brought the ball down a lot. He's got I'll admit, he's kind of intriguing as a 7-footer, but he wanted to play point guard, and he had the ball in his hands a lot. And to say that this was one of the most dysfunctional AAU teams I've ever seen would be an understatement. I mean, they had a lot of good guys out there, and they're getting beat by mediocre Adidas Gauntlet teams by 25 and 30. I mean, they were getting run out of the gym by some teams. And, one thing about 2020 watching guys on the AAU circuit that I didn't like was all these guys who are at least power forwards who were trying to impress people and coaches rather that they could play outside. We go to the first game that I saw on EYBL last spring. We watch Isaiah Todd and some of those guys shooting three-point. I'm looking at names here. It was Isaiah Todd and
Scotty
Barnes with the Knight Riders. And it was just one three-point jack after another one. It was like you've got these guys. It was like they're almost playing for pro positioning rather than college, trying to prove, I'm 6'9", 6'10", and I can step outside and I can make this shot. And I'm like, no, you can't, man. You two combined are like 1 for 20. And they just kept shooting them. They kept shooting them. It's kind of like Maker. So, he's not the only one. The same criticism that I've got with him, I would have with a guy like Isaiah Todd. And it's just right now that so many of these big dudes and Maker 7-footer, they want to play guard and prove they can play on the perimeter.
Yeah. So while on Kentucky's end, he's a guy that they're closely monitoring. They said, that we're going to, continue to monitor that situation and reach out to him and say, we have an open roster spot for you. If you, don't like what you see with the NBA NBA draft, all that stuff, we'd be happy to take you. I talked to Ed Smith going into the weekend, who is Makur's guardian, and he's a guy that we've talked. I think all of us have talked to at least once, or know of him in particular. He's a guy that he likes, historically speaking, he has pushed some narratives in the media and, kind of, wanting to keep recruitments alive of guys like Maker and I think Makur Maker. I think he did the same thing with him for at least a little bit. But there are some things that we've heard about Ed Smith. So when I talked to him, we've talked several times in the past, but I flat out said, I was like, dude, if this kid's going pro, like, I'll go on this show. I'll say, he's a guy that I just don't see going to Kentucky. We'll move right on. I was like, I'll play the game, but just be real with me. I don't want to, waste my time or waste your time by picking up the phone and calling you if this is, just something that you're going to end up doing. And he was like, dude, I totally understand. It's a very complicated situation, especially with what's going on. He said, to be totally honest with you, if the NBA draft combine had happened as it was originally planned, if, this COVID stuff never happened, he was 100% pro. He was already, ready to put his name in and keep his name in, sign an agent and move on. But he said because of how things have unfolded and the fact that there have been no workouts, he's a guy that these NBA teams have looked at him and said, we're intrigued, but we want to get our hands on you. We don't know if you'd fit in immediately. We don't know if we would stash you in the G League, because that's something that Ed Smith and Makur Maker's camp has said that they have no interest in doing. They want to go in and make an immediate impact at either place, whether it's the NBA. If a team can offer them a first round deal, say we're going to take you in the first round, that's going to be the route they end up taking. They want to go to a place that he can play right away and make an immediate impact. But he told me that if it gets to the second round, where that early second round to the middle of the second round, it's going to be about a 50-50 shot that he stays or goes. And he said the closer that they get to the end, the more the better the chances are that he ends up going to college and moving forward with that. Undrafted, if they say, dude, we haven't gotten to see you enough, we have no idea what this is, we're going to stick with what we know, and he's not going to end up getting drafted this year. He said the odds are he's pretty confident that Makur is going to end up going to college. I asked which college, if he had to, narrow it down to 2 schools or whatever, that it would be. He said it was going to be Kentucky, Howard, or UCLA, one of those 3. And he kind of pointed out Kentucky and UCLA being the top 2 options. He said the obvious draw with UCLA is he's going to be, he'd be home in LA, he'd be around his family, he'd be around, his closest friends. They like the weather, or, all the obvious of being out in LA. But they said flat out that Kentucky was a place that they genuinely think he could go and lead them to, that Calipari could end up building him to be an Anthony Davis, Boogie Cousins, Karl Anthony Towns. He named those 3 bigs in particular as guys that he could follow in those footsteps and become a lottery talent at Kentucky. Said that Kenny Payne reaches out to him regularly, and that they're serious about pushing for a commitment, and on the flip side, Maker and his camp are serious about Kentucky as well. I asked about a specific decision date. They said August is definitely what they're targeting right now, and that falls in line with NBA withdrawal deadline. David, I know you were talking about that a little bit, how they were going to hold out as long as they could until the NBA physically would not let him test the waters anymore. So that goes right in line with that.
And he, they had said all along that they were going to go to the last minute. So when the NBA announced that they were moving the deadline, originally it was, we were right here at it.
Yeah.
Right around this date that they'd move it to August because of COVID. Obviously, they're not going to have the draft till later on. And that's the first thing that crossed my mind. But can you imagine, though, being some of these schools where you're really kind of in flux, that you've got maybe more than one player on the NBA fence and this thing has to go into August.
Yeah.
Before you know something. I mean, man, and here's the thing too, there's the talk, and we haven't mentioned, nobody has really much, but the NBA's talking about moving their schedule instead of starting in October, starting at Christmas and going through August from here on out. That way they can have the entire summer and they really don't have to battle with the NFL. And think about if you're a college coach now and you're caught with this every year that, we know Kentucky's guys have already moved on, but can you imagine if they hadn't got agents? So you're sitting there with the departures that they had and you're not sure if they come back or not. And now it's going to be something like that we look at every year going way up into dog days, which is just going to make your job harder for college coaches.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think it's the timing of it is going to be really difficult, especially, we're going to talk about this here in a second with Olivier Sarr and his situation. The NCAA has been so inconsistent in when they're going to, approve waivers, deny waivers. In past years, it seems like that has been the last thing on their plate going into the summer. It definitely seems like they're prioritizing that a little bit more this off season. But again, things are up in the air. It's a case by case basis with all that. So you look at a Kentucky right now who, if Olivier Sarr is not eligible next season, they have to fill out the roster with one more talent. And a guy like Makur Maker would be the perfect, out goes Olivier Sarr, in comes Makur Maker. It would make perfect sense in an ideal world. But yeah, I mean, with all these dates being so unknown and all that, I mean, things are just so up in the air that, I mean, it makes things really, really difficult for all coaching staffs, both, I think, on the NBA level in terms of who they're scouting and how they're preparing for their own season. And Kentucky is, college coaches as well, preparing for their season as well. So while we're on the topic of Olivier Sarr, today was another day that the NCAA approved a waiver of another kid. Marquette got a positive waiver from I'm blanking on his name right now. DJ Carton. He was an Ohio State transfer, just got eligible at Marquette. He had a couple different circumstances. He left the program at Ohio State because of mental health issues. I think in January he leaves and then announces that he's going to put his name in the transfer portal in March, I believe. So, people have pointed out that his situation is a little bit different, but I would argue that it's not all that different in terms of the NCAA, like I've pushed on the show over and over again, that the NCAA is genuinely wanting to do right by these kids and, approve waivers promptly, quickly. We saw Johnny Juzang. He was the first to get his name approved. I think we've seen 2, 3, 4 other guys that have gotten their names approved. Travis, now, what has your gut changed at all on Olivier Sarr and his waiver quest, and what do you think the NCAA ultimately decides to do with him?
I mean, reading the tea leaves and how many waivers that they've granted so far this summer, I think one would have to believe that UK is going to get some good news on the Olivier Sarr front. But at the same time, we've talked about before, NCAA can screw up a lot of things easily. And this is nothing more than reading some tea leaves. There's no inside information here. Just that's my gut feeling.
David, we've talked back and forth about the odds and what UK would do afterward and all that. Has your gut changed at all on what happens with UK and Olivier Sarr's waiver, or are you kind of at the same point you were the last time we talked about it?
About the same point, but anything like you say with DJ Carton, anything where you see players get good news from the NCAA, has to be seen as a positive. And I don't know of any guys that they've turned down yet. I mean, that's about 4 or 5 players, and they've all got good news. They've all been given eligibility. I'm not sure of what Ohio State's take was on DJ Carton, to be honest with you. There is, a waiver that not only that the colleges can give to a player that says, okay, it's okay if you go somewhere else. But there's basically one that says, okay, we want him gone. And I know a player at another school in the SEC that received one from the school he was previously at. So there's so many different kind of individual cases. But like I said, as these guys, and one good thing, some of them they're getting the decision done quickly.
Yeah.
So, I would hope we would hear something from Sarr here in the next 2 or 3 weeks, because I definitely want there to be a Sarr decision by the NCAA before it comes time for Makur Maker to make his choice.
Yeah, I think that is something that, they have to go hand in hand right there. Travis, you were talking a little bit earlier about inside information and, how it really seems like there isn't a whole lot to go around with Olivier Sarr's recruitment. I asked the, same conversation going.
Guys, I'll be right back. I got to check and make sure. This is going to be the great dog caper. You can see I've already changed places 2 or 3 times to keep an eye on this thing. I got to go make sure he's not ransacked the house. I'll be right back.
All right, I got you. It's all good. Travis, like you said, the inside information is not, readily available because it doesn't exist right now with on UK's end of things. They have genuinely no clue what's going on with it. They don't, it could come out tomorrow. They could get the waiver, returned tomorrow. It could be next week. It could be next month. It could be the day before the regular season starts. They have no genuine idea of when this is going to happen. I think there's an understanding within the program that the NCAA wants to do right by these guys. They're hopeful, but at the same time, they know that there's a little bit of a history with the NCAA, with Enes Kanter and other guys, throughout college basketball that have kind of gotten some questionable, returns on NCAA decisions. So they feel hopeful and they feel optimistic on their side because they presented a very good case. I think that there's extreme confidence that they got their point across. They said, this kid didn't have enough time to make an NBA decision after his coach was fired at Wake Forest. There were so many different circumstances that led to it. It wasn't just the fact that Danny Manning was fired. There was a lot of stuff that went into it. They presented all of that, and now it's just a waiting game. They have no idea when it's going to happen and all that. But I don't think they have any feel of what the decisions are going to be either. They don't know the what or the when as of right now. It's just kind of the waiver was submitted back in May, and now it's just a waiting game. I think the general rule is 21 days from the time the waiver is submitted to the time they get a response, but it's a case-by-case basis. Things change, Sarr's case is a little bit more dynamic than some other cases might be, so it might take a little bit longer, but it should be a month. A month is kind of the hot thing. So we could hear something at the end of this week. We could, could be another week or two, but it's slowly approaching, or I guess quickly approaching. I think we're going to hear it sooner rather than later. But Travis, we've talked about kind of roster makeup and what would happen with Olivier Sarr and without, especially in the front court. Now, there's one guy that we've talked about off the air, and that's Cameron Fletcher, who within the organization, the program, the school is extremely high on Cameron Fletcher. I was told that they're kind of planning on him being the backup 4 behind Keon Brooks right now, which was kind of shocking to me that, he was, I think he's rated as low as top 60, top 70 in the country, depending on which outlet you look at. So there's kind of a pessimism in the national recruiting ranks and all that about Cam, but there's an internal optimism about Fletcher and what he's going to bring to the table next year. Travis, you had some stuff that you wanted to get off your chest about him and what you've learned about him and all that. What is that?
Yeah, so I talked to somebody today in the St. Louis area, very connected in all sports, that was telling me he knows Cam very well. He's talked to him. He knows the family really well. He was telling me that Cam's kind of got a bad rep. A lot of people think he's a, quote, asshole. He's a jerk. He's a all about me type of player. But he said, I'll tell you this, that this is what he said, whenever Cam gets to Kentucky, he knows he's not BJ Boston. He knows he's not Terrence Clark. He's going to buy into being a small ball 4. He himself has said that he's not a 3. He's a small ball 4. and he thinks that he is going to absolutely thrive in that role, and that he knows that he's never going to be the number one option, and that he knows what he needs to do to get to the league. He knows what he needs to do to be a part of a championship team, which is be the garbage guy, the high energy defense, corner threes, just rebounding. And by his junior year, he could average like 10 and 7 and be like the fourth or fifth option.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of optimism. He said that a lot of people try to tear Cam down, but at his core, he's a really good kid. He's misunderstood, and that he's going to he's really going to buy in at Kentucky.
Yeah, I had heard all those same rumblings, AAU circuit and just that type of stuff. And I actually went to do that feature on him. We had him on this show I think it was 2-3 months back, and I was kind of bracing for that, that response from him. I was expecting to get a kid that, he didn't care about talking to the media. He was, he would be short with me, didn't want to talk to me, all that stuff. But when I got there, the dude was smiling. He was having a great time. It was his senior night. All the people within his basketball program, his coaches, they were all hyping him up. His family members, his close friends, they were all hyping him up. The front office ladies, everybody that I talked to at that school loved Cameron Fletcher. And I was like, okay, this isn't what I heard leading up to his commitment and then afterward. And then during the game, Coach Cal was there. Kenny Payne went to come see him on his senior night, and he played out of his mind. I think he dropped like 23 and 15. I think he went 4 for 4 from corner threes. I mean, jumping the passing lanes. Defensively, he was sharp. I mean, high motor. I mean, everything that you wanted to see out of a guy his size and his athleticism, his strength. That's, he showed that in a high pressure situation with Coach Cal. So I came away extremely impressed, and I was like, man, this is way different than all the stuff that I heard behind the scenes. So to hear you be as optimistic, and then after, hearing Kentucky's, on Kentucky side, how optimistic they are, I was genuinely impressed. David, I think, you've heard a lot of these same things. After hearing that Kentucky kind of is planning on utilizing him in a small ball 4 role, has your mind changed on him at all, or do you still, are you still a little bit pessimistic about his game and what he can bring to the table? As I know that you've been kind of, not very outspoken either way about it. I think I don't know what your expectations are for him. So what would you say those are?
Well, the word small ball makes me nervous a little bit. To start out, I hope that's not any indicator, maybe on the gut feeling on Sarr. I don't think it is, but you never know. Maybe they're thinking when Sarr's out of the game that they may go to the small ball, when he's not in. So it may be a situation where they're going to have a couple of different looks, a bigger lineup and then a smaller lineup. That could be it. His size, he's, 6'7", probably right around that range. So playing a 4, is probably maybe a little bit of surprise, but it wouldn't be if they go small. The word misunderstood makes me nervous. I've seen a lot of misunderstood players, and I've coached misunderstood players. I've watched them from afar. I've watched them in the stands. I've watched them on recruiting trips, and they can really turn out to be headaches, and a lot of times it doesn't work well. But if you get into a right situation, you'll see a guy like that work out great at one place and then not work out at another one. If you watched The Last Dance, Dennis Rodman comes to mind. He could play great for Chuck Daly, and then you go to the San Antonio Spurs and it's a train wreck, and then you go to the Bulls and it's good, and you go somewhere else and it's bad. So it's going to depend on his mindset and setting, and how he takes coaching, because it's going to be in your face, it's going to be confrontational from John Calipari. So at either iron sharpens iron, so we're going to see.
Yeah. Now, worst case scenario, say Olivier Sarr's waiver is not approved and UK has to go to the drawing board. Let's say, last case resort, what do you think Kentucky does to close out the roster? And we'll end the show here. What do you think Kentucky does to close out the roster? Are there any names outside of Makur Maker that you would, kind of keep a close eye on? Or do you think that your guess would be as good as a Kentucky coaching staff right now because there's just simply nothing out there? Travis, what do you think?
I think you could see, not saying this guy in particular, but you're like a guy like your Nay or your Aney or whatever it is, a guy like that could pop up on the radar. Somebody like that would definitely be serviceable. There wouldn't be anybody that could transfer outside of Luke Garza, who's not going to transfer. That would be as good as Olivier Sarr at Kentucky. And I think that that would be an option, maybe a 2021 reclass, even though there's not many floating around there. But I feel like if Kentucky pulls some strings and push some buttons, that there could be a reclass pop up. Or, they could just roll with what they got. Trial by fire with Isaiah Jackson. Cameron Fletcher, see what he's got at the 4, Lance Ware. So,
David, do you have any, gut on who that could be or, where UK could land?
I've got 2 names, Makur Maker. And outside of that, if it doesn't work, get used to watching Cameron Fletcher play that small ball 4.
Yeah, what I found really interesting was that UK sees Lance Ware as a 5. I think the case would be that it would be Keon and Cameron Fletcher at the small ball 4s, and it would be Lance Ware, Isaiah Jackson, and who am I missing?
Keon Brooks.
No, Keon would be at the 4. Would it just be
at the 5? Yeah, it would be Isaiah.
And Lance Ware. Wow, yeah, UK would be so ridiculously thin.
Well, I still, and I've held this out for Isaiah Jackson, and we're talking about Fletcher and Keon Brooks, who's got a new haircut, by the way.
It looks good.
Yeah. It does look good. Does look good. But I have not been one that just wants to jump off the edge of the earth if that's what the post lineup is going to be. I think you've got a bunch of 5 stars there. And like I said, I've been big on Isaiah Jackson, but it's really interesting. Probably the guy in this recruiting class who gets talked about less than anybody, and I'm glad you brought him up, Lance Ware.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Lance Ware he's a guy that when we had Devin Askew on this show, he hyped Lance Ware up more than anybody on the roster. Said that, I'm telling you, that's the guy to watch out for. He said over and over again, Lance Ware is that guy. And when I went to see him at Hoop Hall, he went heads up against Evan Mobley, and I swear to you, rocked his world, just destroyed him in the paint. I think he had like 18 and 15. And it wasn't just about points. It was just aggression, throwing elbows, just getting aggressive with him. And, for a guy of Evan Mobley's potential and, what he's expected to be at the college level this year, Lance Ware thoroughly outplayed him from top to bottom, and it wasn't even close. I genuinely came away thinking, wow, Lance Ware is going to be way better than I thought it was. And I talked to his coach, Coach Brunson at Camden afterward, and he said something along the lines of like, if you're going to come at him, you better be prepared to get punched in the throat. That's who Lance Ware is. So that mindset would fit in a Kentucky front court, and I feel like that would fit in, sooner rather than later, because those fighters are the kind of guys that Coach Cal has leaned on in the past to contribute sooner rather than later. So I'll be very interested to see how this all unfolds, and if Lance Ware is given a bigger role than people may have given him credit for.
And I just got to think, if you come out of Camden, New Jersey, man, you're not scared of a whole lot. So I don't think he's going to back down to any challenges.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. All right, well, go for it.
The thing with Lance is he doesn't do anything that really jumps off the page. He doesn't have the highlight films of him constantly dunking on people, hitting step back threes. He's more of a junkyard dog type of guy that Kentucky hasn't had since I can't even remember who I would compare him to of the Cal era.
But he's got a really good mid range.
Yeah, he
I
does.
need to watch him out about 15, 17 feet out in that area. It's pretty good.
A lot of people that I trust their opinions on basketball say that he's not going to be in Lexington for 4 years. They don't even think he'll be there for 3 years.
I'm right there with you. I wholeheartedly agree. I was a big fan.
Andy Borman thinks he's who's the New York Reds guy that we all talked to. He told me a year ago, maybe, I think it was last summer, when we talked right after he committed or was getting ready to, maybe. I don't remember what the circumstance was. But he kept saying he's a rim protector. You know, he said he will be a rim protector. So, you know, he's got length. Says his athleticism is better than what people think. He said he will be able to alter shots and rebound. Yeah,
I'm really excited for it, and I'm really excited about how to see how these next couple weeks go, especially waiting on Olivier Sarr's eligibility. That's going to be something that is going to answer so many questions for us and relieve so many of those stresses that Kentucky fans have. And us on this show, we're not going to have to do these stupid hypotheticals about what if this guy, his leg falls off, and we won't have to do any of that stuff because we know that UK is very, very confident in the front court and the roster as a whole if Olivier Sarr receives his waiver. So we'll be on the lookout for that. We'll also be on Makur Maker watch. We'll see if any movement happens there, and we'll keep our ears to the ground.
Next Monday is when Jonathan Kuminga will make his decision. It won't be Kentucky, but that's something that people probably want to tune in for. It's going to be June 22nd.
Oh wow! Has that been put out, or is that a behind the scenes thing?
Tobias Bass put it out.
You know what? I don't know who that is, but I trust him. I trust Tobias Bass. So, yeah, that'll be something that we'll talk about next week, and the fact that he is almost 100% not going to end up at Kentucky. He'll probably take the G League route. I might reach out to Jalen Green's dad to see if there's any movement on that. So we'll be on the lookout with that. We'll keep our ears to the ground and keep you guys updated as best we can. With that, we will end it there. Travis, where can fans find your work?
You can find me on Twitter at @TravGraph_Rivals. Be sure to follow. It's the same but I got a new account recently. And you can find my work alongside David's on Cats Illustrated, and then you can listen to my other podcast, the Cats Camp podcast, on any podcast network.
And David, where can fans find your work?
Same thing as Travis is doing a great job, man. And at Cats Illustrated, just really impressed with both you guys. I think I'm the grandpa here. But you guys are, young, and I know you said for up and comers, and you guys have got past up and comer stage. At your age, man, your future is just great. But what you do now is great.
Well, we appreciate it.
But alongside Travis at Cats Illustrated and Coach David Sisk at Twitter.
You can find me on Twitter at JackPilgrimKSR. You can reach out to me via email, jpilgrim@KentuckySportsRadio.com. And with that, we will be back next week for another jam-packed Sources Say podcast. We will see you then.